Hello, this is Stephen Applegate for Thurmont Neighborhood Watch. It is Saturday, April 1st, 2017. I am here with Doug Benson for Commodore Recording Studio in Thurmont, Maryland. He was happy enough to join with me today with a 360-degree video. So if you are joining us for the first time, take a look around with your smartphone. And since this is recording in HD, you'll be able to put on your VR headset and do the same, but in virtual reality from the comfort of your living room couch, perhaps. But I would like to have Doug explain exactly what he is doing here and how long he's been in the industry, how you got into it, who's your clientele, if you're so willing to say, and what are we looking here at in your studio?
Boy, where do I begin? I actually first worked in studios back in 1978. Of course, it was a lot simpler technology back in those days. It was harder to use and harder to get a good result because we don't have all the digital technology that we have today. But being a music major in college, you're always expected to write songs for your girlfriends and things like that. So that's what me and my friends in bands were doing. There was a fellow in Rockville that had a studio in his basement. This was 1978, and this little 8-track thing was $12 an hour. We thought that was so expensive back then. And went down there, and that's where I kind of got the whole bug for multi-track recording. Went on to college, took courses in electronic music and things of that sort, which, again, it was much more primitive technology than what we're using now. But that stuck with me, and I worked as a musician, pretty much from then on, and still continue to do so. In 1992, I moved to Thurmont specifically to open a recording studio, which at that point was in the basement of my house. Went through a couple of moves and a couple of name changes, and 3.5 years ago, finally decided to go for it and leased this building here on Main Street, 204 East Main Street, Thurmont, Maryland.
And how could we find you on the internet, or what's a website or a phone number we can reach you?
That would be CommodoreStudio.com. Phone number is regular Thurmont number, 301-271-2435. I've been here, like I said, 3.5 years. This is the building that for you hardcore Thurmontians used to be the Veterinarian years ago. Before that, it was Antonio's Pizza. And it's been a number of things since then, and was empty for a while. But we basically just gutted about half the building inside and turned it into custom designed rooms that are specially shaped to provide better audio. For example, the control room that we're in right now, you probably won't be able to get a good sense of this on a 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional camera, but it's 18 inches wider in the back. It's 9 inches higher in the back, so it's a little bit like sitting in a cone if you're back there on the sofa listening to a playback from the monitors. And without going into a lot of detail, there are acoustical reasons for doing that and not wanting so many parallel walls. Sure. There's also a rather large performance area outside that window. You can see I have some things that I'm testing set up at the grand piano right now to try and figure out how to isolate them better from other musicians in the room when bands are recording using the acoustic piano. And we record local bands. We have jazz groups, classical. We go out in the field and record things on site, a lot of church concerts and things like that. And probably half my business here is recording obsolete formats, digitizing magnetic tape, 78 RPM records, the custom LPs that people used to make back in the 60s and 70s, your high school choir, things that are not available on CD anymore. And even odd things like 16-inch radio transcriptions.
Wow.
That are too big to play on a regular turntable. I do a lot of work for vintage jazz labels, restoring early jazz performances, removing the noise, crackle, and things like that.
Okay.
Even had a Grammy nomination for one project back in 2006 of King Oliver's jazz band, which was back in 1923. his second cornet player was this young kid named Louis Armstrong. So they were Louis's first recordings.
Great.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. Yeah, I'm glad you're able to share that with us. Probably going to keep it minimum of about 8 to 10 minutes for the total recording, just because I'm still getting familiar with the system itself. But
Sure.
the quality should be decent. The audio, I'm hoping, is going to be okay. Now, I do have an external lapel microphone that I use every now and then, but unfortunately with the setup here, the 3.5 millimeter jack doesn't allow me to use the camera at the same time. But over the years, I've acquired some appreciation for work such as what you're doing here. And most recently, I'm using a smartphone application that allows me to mix some digital music together, which I've been putting together on my own YouTube videos, which is pretty straightforward. I'm a man of convenience, so when it comes to something that's just handheld and a computer that you can hold in your hands to perform any task, let alone mastering some music scores, it's an art in itself. So I could appreciate all that goes into this. In the 40 years that you've been in the industry, I'm sure you've seen quite a few changes over the years. But
when I started in the industry, we had to do edits by cutting magnetic tape with a razor blade and taping the pieces together.
Wow.
And I got really good at that, but it's like the horse and buggy, we don't need it anymore. So when the digital technology came out, and I fought it, curmudgeonly old guy for years, I don't need this, hippy-dippy, whatever. And finally I had to learn Pro Tools because I had to teach a course in it. And I sat down in the first 10 minutes and I was like, wait a minute, you can do what? And just kind of kicking myself for not starting this 5 years earlier. So when I see the things now that are available on smartphones and tablets and things like that, my first inclination would be to say, oh, well, how good could it be? But the thing is, I know how good it can be.
Sure.
So I have a lot of people that bring me things that they recorded themselves, and some of them sound astoundingly good. And when it comes to the mastering, which is basically just getting all of your songs and tracks to sound consistent and to sound good no matter where they're played. A lot of times there's very little work to be done because what they were able to do on smaller devices is technology you couldn't buy for any price 5 years ago now is a few dollars.
Absolutely.
So
and it's free
Yep.
on the App Store or the Play Store.
Yep.
And younger and younger generations, my daughter, who's 9 years old now, knows how to download an app on her iPad mini, and she plays with the new Musical.ly app all the time, but allows her to be creative one way or another. But I think music, as I was brought up at a young age in grade school, playing the trumpet and teaching myself acoustic guitar, just out of high school, and some basic piano techniques. I always had an ear for music. My grandfather had the only balalaika orchestra in the United States. He was invited to play for President Carter back in the 1970s, and up until his death in 1996. From 1966, he had an orchestra who played for the church. And he orchestrated his own music based on memory from when he was a young man in Russia. And he brought that to this country when they emigrated in the late 1940s. So it was instilled in me. I appreciate what goes into every aspect of the industry. And I appreciate you seeing us today.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Doug.